Microsoft laid off a bunch of people. Speaking of tech layoffs, let's get to that real quickly. This is fun. Microsoft held an invite-only Sting concert for executives in Davos the day before the company announced layoffs of 10,000 employees. Remember, when they're cutting costs, they're not cutting it where it matters, okay? They still got money in the budget for the Sting concert at Davos. They just don't have money for you. Wild thing to consider. Google has laid off a bunch of people. Microsoft laid off a bunch of people. Amazon has laid off a bunch of people. Of course, part of the reason why they are laying off a bunch of people is because this is this is relatively capitalist take. They're laying off a bunch of people because in 2021 and in 2020, when COVID happened, the tech sector boomed because people couldn't move around. So everything they did online. They did it on the internet. So they hired a lot. Overhired, I guess. Not that that's like a real thing. I don't think that there is such a thing as overhiring, okay? But from a company's perspective, the wild part about it is that, like, it's not like they overhired and then, allowed staff to work less hours. They overhired and then they kept the same fucking hours for everybody else. What you're supposed to do in this circumstance is, hire more people and then cut the hours, but still pay the same salary in a normal situation. But now they're able to fire people so that they can get rid of bloat, because they know that the remaining staff is going to work doubly as hard. Here it is. Between June 2021 and 2022, Microsoft's headcount increased by 40,000 people. Now, an increase in headcount makes sense. As you can see, year over year, as your company grows, you increase, and then your company downsizes a little bit to improve efficiency, which means making the smaller labor force, now reduced labor force, do the same amount of work for the same amount of pay, by the way. Why are there so many tech layoffs, and why should we be worried? A Stanford scholar explains. Over the recent months, tech companies have been laying off workers by the thousands. It is estimated that in 2022 alone, over 120,000 people have been dismissed from their jobs, some of the biggest players in tech. What explains why so many companies are laying large numbers off their labor force? The answer is simple: copycat behavior, according to Jeffrey Pfeffer, a professor at Stanford Graduate School of Business. He's saying it's mostly social contagion. Behavior spreads through a network as companies almost mindlessly copy what others are doing. When a few firms hire staff, others will probably follow suit. Most problematic is a behavior that kills people. For example, research has shown that layoffs can increase the odds of suicide by 2 times or more. Layoffs don't work to improve company performance, but it does improve to work stock performance. Academic studies have shown that time and time again, workplace reductions don't do much for paring costs. Severance packages cost money, layoffs increase unemployment insurance rates, and cuts reduce workplace morale and productivity. But if you can demonstrate, after you get over the initial hump of diminishing stock prices that come along with the original layoff, unless it's coming at the heels of a merger and acquisition, in which case then layoffs are expected and it immediately improves your stock prices. Over the course of the next quarter or in the immediate quarter, if the output remains the same, your stock prices will increase. That's how the stock market works. For over 4 decades, Pfeffer studied hiring and firing practices. The tech industry layoffs are basically an instance of social contagion. He says they're imitating behavior and not particularly evidence-based. I've had people say to me that they know layoffs are harmful to company well-being, let alone the well-being of employees, and don't accomplish much. But everybody's doing layoffs, and their board is asking why they aren't doing layoffs also. Love that. Do you think layoffs in tech are some indication of the tech bubble bursting and the company preparing for a recession? Could there be a tech recession? Yes. Was there a bubble in valuations? Absolutely. Did Meta overhire? Probably. But is that why they're laying people off? Of course not. Meta has plenty of money. These companies are still all making money. They're doing it because other companies are doing it. Don't you love capitalism? Capitalism is so sick. Like, this guy, his job is to explain capitalism. Like, this guy works for a capitalist institution, Stanford University. He is in the Graduate School of Business, okay? He has read the ancient tomes of capitalism, okay? This is his job. And you ask this professor who is giving people MBAs, okay? And he's like, yeah, they're doing it on a vibes-based economy. They don't have to do it. They're just doing it because, it's vibes. It's fucking vibes. Good system, dude. Microsoft has $100 billion in cash, but they still need to curtail their capex and opex to appease shareholders, even though they'll bring back everyone when the market rebounds. Yeah, they'll engage in mass hiring again, just like you. Yeah, vibes based for the most part. What are some myths or misunderstanding about layoffs? Layoffs often do not cut costs, as there are many instances of laid off employees being hired back as contractors with companies paying the contracting firm. Layoffs often do not increase stock prices, in part because layoffs can signal that a company is having difficulty. Layoffs do not increase productivity. Layoffs do not solve what is often the underlying problem, which is often an ineffective strategy, a loss of market share, or too little revenue. Layoffs are basically a bad decision. Companies sometimes lay off people that they have just recruited, oftentimes with paid recruitment bonuses. When the economy turns back in the next 12, 14, or 18 months, they will go back to the market and compete with the same companies to hire talent. They're basically buying labor at a high price and selling low. Not the best decision. People don't pay attention to the evidence against layoffs. The evidence is pretty extensive. Some of it is reviewed in the book I wrote on human resource management, The Human Equation, Building Profits by Putting People First. If companies paid attention to the evidence, they could get some competitive leverage because they would actually be basing their decisions on science. There is no fucking science. It doesn't matter. Because when your shareholders are saying, Facebook is laying off motherfuckers, why aren't you? What are you supposed to do? You're supposed to do... You could sit there and explain to them that this makes no sense. We shouldn't do this. But they don't give a f. It's all fake is what I'm saying. All of it. Every part of it. Most of it is fake. Sometimes I feel like all of it is fake. And if everything is fake, then they might as well do the right thing by, people who are generating the value. But they don't. You've written about the negative health effects of layoffs. Can you talk about this? We talked about that already. What's your reaction to some of the most recent headlines like Meta laying off 11,000 employees? I am concerned. Most of my recent research is focused on the effect of the workplace on human health and how economic insecurity is bad for people. This guy's a rugged Marxist. This guy's the Marxist that they're talking about in colleges. Retailers are preemptively laying off staff, even as final demand remains uncertain. Apparently, many organizations will trade off a worse customer experience for reduced staffing costs, not taking into account the well-established finding that it's typically much more expensive to attract new customers than it is to keep existing ones happy. Are there past examples of contagious layoffs like the one we are seeing now? After September 11, every airline except Southwest did layoffs. By the end of that year, Southwest, which did not do any layoffs, gained market share. A.G. Lafley, who was the former CEO of Procter & Gamble, said the best time to gain ground on your competition is when they are in retreat, when they are cutting their services, when they're cutting their product innovation because they have laid people off. James Goodnight, the CEO of the software company SAS Institute, has also never done layoffs. He actually hired during the last two recessions because he said it's the best time to pick up talent. My advice to a worker who's been laid off is when they find a job in a company where they say people are their most important asset, they actually check to make sure that the company behaves consistently with that espoused value when times are tough. How do you check that? There is no company every company says that. Not a single company abides by that. What the f are you supposed to do? You know what I mean? If layoffs don't work, what's a better solution for companies that want to mitigate the problems? One thing that Lincoln Electric, which is a famous manufacturer of arc welding equipment, did well is instead of laying off 10% of their workforce, they had everybody take a 10% wage cut except for senior management, which took a larger cut. So instead of giving 100% of the pain to 10% of the people, they give 100% of the people 10% of the pain. Companies could use economic stringency as an opportunity, as Goodnight at the SAS Institute did in the 2008 recession and in the 2000 tech recession. He used the downturn to upgrade workforce skills. Dude, how about top down? How about they make even larger cuts on the executive management? Through a FOIA request, I got my hands on Janet Yellen's 1996 memo offering a theoretical explanation of why the declined workers' bargaining power might allow for easier monetary policy. You can download the memo here. So I work at Microsoft, and the last few days have been a nightmare. They're literally not telling us if they're done with layoffs and if our teams are safe. It's going to be perpetual work agony until potentially March, and we feel like we have to work harder simply because we are that more scared of losing our job. Couple that with seeing this, this is a fire headline. That stings. Microsoft hosts Sting concert before laying off 10,000 employees. But hey, you don't understand. That was for the executives at Davos, okay? Not you. The executives at Davos and all the other potential future clients, potential future shareholders, you know what I mean? Like the movers and shakers of the industry. They had to do a gathering for 50 people, dude. Anyway, even management at MSFT is pissed off. Microsoft is pissed off. They're not being told of what's happening in their own organizations. Well, such is the nature of a capitalist organization of the economy, where faceless, lifeless people who will never see the proverbial factory floor get to make decisions on your behalf. The people who are at the factory, the proverbial factory floor. Obviously, at Microsoft, there is no factory floor for the most part. All of that stuff is outsourced to the third world. But I mean, like, even when you're generating value as a wage laborer inside of Microsoft in a white-collar job, you are still generating value for them, and your managers are not going to get any sort of understanding, any sort of clear understanding. And they can do that. They can do this all the time. They do it all the time. They can get away with it. Those guys are the bosses, you see. Google has laid off 12,000, Microsoft 10,000, Amazon 18,000, Meta 11,000, Twitter 4,000, Salesforce 8,000, 200,000 plus laid off in Texas at the beginning of 2022. And for no reason other than everyone else is doing it, tech workers need a union. Vox did it, I guess, as well. Hate to hear about the layoffs at Vox. Solidarity and best wishes to those impacted. Vox Media is cutting 7% of workers as well. Or slated to cut 7%. Yeah, learn to code, by the way, they said. And at the time, one of the things that stuck out to me, at least, was like they just wanted you to learn to code so that your market value was lower as an individual worker. If everyone knows how to code, then you have more coders. Then it's much easier to just depress wages in that sector, even at a time when there's a massive tech bubble going on and executives and owners and VCs and angel investors are making out like fucking bandits. It is easy to explain why an increase in job insecurity translates into a permanent decline in the natural rate of unemployment, although each version of the efficiency wage model offers a slightly different rationale. In essence, unemployment serves as a worker discipline device because the prospect of a costly unemployment spell produces sufficient fear of job loss to motivate workers to perform well without constant and costly supervision. This is funny when you hear Janet Yellen say this, but it's like every fucking econ textbook has this baked into it. Everyone that has taken any sort of macroeconomic principles class understands that, like, the way that they write this shit in the classroom, in your textbooks, is to make you feel like you're just at the widget factory and not like real human beings. Labor is just simply a commodity. Labor is simply just another piece of the puzzle. And that's they overlook the fact that those are individual workers. You, as a matter of fact, are going to be that person eventually. You're going to have a family. You're going to have children. You're going to have people that you're taking care of. You're going to have bad days, good days. People get upset at this kind of thing, but then continue defending capitalism. Meanwhile, this is capitalism.